Although House of the Dragon often portrays the Dance of the Dragons as a fight between two queens, mothers and women, there were many other players on the table. Both Rhaenyra and Alicent have their courts with their own motivations for supporting them. Characters like Daemon, Lharys and Corlys have managed to stand out and receive plenty of screen time. But one character who seems to be overlooked is Alicent's father, Otto Hightower. While others have received plenty of characterization, Otto seems to have just been relegated as the antagonist. Today on Fantasy Archive, we'll learn about Otto Hightower. While he might seem a bit flat at first, remember that he was the king's second-in-command, the father of Alicent, and a major architect who set this war in motion. In the times we do see Otto, he has established himself as an intelligent and powerful man. Perhaps the most defining thing about him is his embodiment of Westerosi tradition, even more so than Alicent. Something that puts him at odds with the more radical blacks, and even his daughter. On paper, Otto should seem like an incredibly powerful man. He is a scion to one of the most powerful houses in the Seven Kingdoms, the Hightowers. While not considered one of the greatest houses, they are one of the oldest and richest families, controlling Old Town, a city second only to the King's Landing. Within Old Town, they have the famous Hightower, the Starry Sept, and the Meister's Citadel. This should mean that Otto stands at the top of the pecking order, at least if he controlled these territories. Unfortunately, Otto is only a second son. By Westerosi succession laws, the first son will inherit his father's titles, land, and income. Perhaps if a lord is generous, he might leave something for the rest of his children, but for the most part, second sons are left to find their fortune elsewhere. Robert Royce says it best: "A second son must find glory where he can." While Otto certainly benefits from having the Hightower name, his powers come from the position that the king has granted. This certainly explains his ambition, and not only is it a character trait, but it's also a survival method. With his position as Hand, Otto's authority rises beyond his home region of the Reach, rivaling even major houses in power. Even his older brother, Hobart, would have to heed his words as Hand. But this also puts him in a precarious position. When this title is taken away, Otto is left without a title to fall back on, or a castle to return to, depending on his brother's patronage. While it's highly unlikely he'd ever end up penniless, being removed as Hand to the King leaves his future and those of his family far from secure. Another defining trait about Otto is that it's difficult to tell where his genuine advice ends and where his ambition begins. While his distrust of Daemon and his desire to marry off Alicent does scream personal ambition, it's important to remember that his points aren't invalid, and he's also provided genuinely good advice. Take his disapproval of Daemon's appointment as Lord Commander of the City Watch, for example. While it's true that he organized the Gold Cloaks and turned them into effective fighting forces, his methods for handling crime were also incredibly bloodthirsty and extreme, leading to many people being killed on his first night. While Daemon justifies this as enforcing the king's laws, it certainly seems like Daemon is enjoying his work a bit too much. At the same time, Otto's concerns about the prince forming a personal following around himself aren't unfounded, as the Watch seem more loyal to him than the crown. The same is true with Otto's desire for King Viserys to remarry. Although he did name his daughter Rhaenyra as heir to the throne, Otto is right to point out that many lords would never support this plan, even after swearing an oath. His push for Viserys to remarry in hopes of fathering a son was a pragmatic solution that could defuse the situation. While certainly self-serving, a marriage between Viserys and Alicent would benefit the crown. The Hightowers are one of the most powerful and influential houses. Their authority could keep the other nobles in line and provide the Targaryens access to the second wealthiest city in the continent. This would have gone a long way to ensure a smooth succession crisis. The same was true when he proposed marrying Aegon and Rhaenyra. Both these children had their own supporters who were willing to go to war over them. Marrying them would have been the best plan to prevent a war while giving both sides the crown. This came at a time when the succession was far from certain, and Otto's critiques weren't entirely innocent either. Though named heir, Rhaenyra did not help her case. She had rejected all her suitors and did little to strengthen her position, making it harder for lords to publicly support her. Her trips to a brothel only added flames to the fire and raised more questions about eligibility. Then there are the Valyrians, Otto's other great rivals. Whatever might be said about Otto's decision to push his daughter to marry a king more than twice her age, Corlys deserves his share of criticisms for doing the same thing with his daughter Lhaena. Not only was the attempt incredibly ham-fisted, but Lhaena was even younger than Alicent and was too young to even have children at the time. This means that even if Viserys did marry her, it would not immediately solve the succession crisis for the foreseeable future. One comparison often made by fans of House of the Dragon is with Otto and Littlefinger. To a certain degree, that's true, as both men are scheming politicians who have attained high positions and now have their king's ears. They have also started to mentor some promising young women to groom for queenship. However, these men have fundamentally different beliefs and stand at the exact opposite of the ruling system. Littlefinger was born to a poor family, barely considered nobility, ensuring he received nothing but scorn from the Westerosi nobility despite his talents and brilliance. On the other hand, Otto was from the noblest of noble houses, boasting more wealth, power, and authority than most men could ever imagine. Even as a second son, Otto would never want for anything, as the system is fundamentally skewed in his favor. But while both men come from different walks of life, both crave the same thing: power. Littlefinger's goal is to sow chaos in the realm and bring an end to the ruling families so that amidst the chaos, he could emerge at the top of the heap. On the other hand, Otto is highly motivated to maintain the status quo to keep his power. This includes keeping archaic laws, resisting change, and preventing social mobility. Change means losing some of his power, as his plans were built on ending the succession crisis by providing Viserys with the son he lacks. For a man like Otto, who does everything expected of a Westerosi man, he still finds himself forced to work with foreigners like Mysaria and his daughter to maintain his hold on power. But the challenge doesn't stop there, as not only does he have to work with them, but both women assert their power over Otto, reminding him that for all his wealth and influence, he depended on them. It's why Otto is so desperate to have Aegon crowned even after Alicent is queen, because Rhaenyra's claim would constantly remain a threat to his power and he needed to have it broken. However, if he was certain of his actions once Viserys dies, he failed to raise his grandson for kingship, which cost him his position as Hand. This goes to another point in that it shows while they both, Otto and Littlefinger, might be similar, their ambitions led to their own undoing.